Welcome back. Thank you for being part of the Subversive Preacher community today. This is a reflection on the lectionary readings for the 10th Sunday of Pentecost, Year A. And they include the Exodus story in Exodus 34 when Moses comes down from the mountain with the stone tablets. And from Luke 9 when Jesus goes up to the mountain with his best buds. And a Marie Howe poem which is once or twice or three times I saw something. Now I am caught between an emotional rock and a theological hard place. And here's what I mean. That story from Luke, which appears in the other Gospels too, is a problem. And that's the theological hard place. I'll get to that in a minute. But first, the emotional rock is that they named the test of the first plutonium bomb Trinity, and they dropped the next one on the Feast of the Transfiguration, August 6th. It is absolutely blasphemous on the one hand, but utterly predictable on the other. Human beings are nothing if not blasphemous. We're always placing ourselves alongside God in some way. And despite what the report says, it's not clear that Oppenheimer named the July 1945 bomb test Trinity after a John Donne poem. And I certainly hope not. There is competing evidence that instead it was named Trinity after an Army officer's comment that they would need the Holy Trinity to help them move that 200-plus ton bomb to the test site. But there is no evidence that the date for the first use of that bomb that would demonstrate that human beings could now destroy themselves was chosen because it was the Feast of the Transfiguration. Rather, it had more to do with the weather and with the Soviet Russia's planned invasion of Manchuria on August 8th. But really, the Trinity and Transfiguration so intimately intertwined with the age of human Armageddon, it is blasphemous, even by my low heathen theological standards. But think about this. Some of science has declared that this time we're living in is the Anthropocene age. Basically, that means the time of humans. They date the beginning of this human epic to Trinity, to the first test of the plutonium bomb, because there is geochemical traces of those tests found all over the planet today. So the Anthropocene age is the one in which humans have done more to influence the environment than geological events. So here we are, teetering on the edge of the apocalypse with ever-increasing heat, accompanied by the evaporation of water, and at the same time, more terror weapons than ever. And this whole episode begins with taking the name of God in vain by giving its igniting moment the name of God, and then using that weapon on the Feast of the Transfiguration, a feast commemorating a mythical moment when God declared love for Jesus. Now, I actually have a gut emotional response to all that, even though I'm pretty indifferent most of the time to the ongoing cross-contamination of our spiritual tradition and our worst historical actions. Because the history of institutional religion is not a shiny coin in comparison to the history of human empire and its political and military obscenities. But entangling God with the logical conclusion of our worst self-destructive proclivities, that's too much even for me. But up against this emotional rock is the theological hard place which is the actual transfiguration story. We all know the credibility of Christianity is hanging by a thread in this highly secularized age of ours, and I dare say doctrinal faith is a struggle for many of the people who are hearing this right now. In fact, I know it is. I routinely talk with people who are hesitant to walk into a church, even the most progressive ones, because they think that everybody inside a church believes things that they don't believe, so maybe they don't belong there. I tell them they would be surprised what people inside churches don't believe. Even in our little place, even in this online community, we would discover that we are that there is a wide gulf between the faith and beliefs and hopes held within these heads and hearts. But my point is, asking postmodern people to accept without doubt the story that Jesus danced on a cloud and with long dead mythical figures while God audibly spoke to the witnesses, well, that's just not a good sales technique. Now, we can make a good stew out of some of those details, like the silliness of Peter offering to make little shrines just for that moment. Or we could stand it up alongside Exodus and tie the two stories together by showing how they parallel each other, even though they are 1,000 years apart, and talk about how ancient people said important things about their spiritual heroes. We could do all that, but that's kind of a lot of work. Now, frankly, and this may surprise some folks, I love Jesus. The spiritual wisdom held within the stories about the life and ministry of Jesus are amazing. I've read many of the spiritual texts and holy sayings from a lot of the world's religions, but I remain the most moved and most impressed by the body of wisdom associated with Jesus. But I could not go out and tell most of the unchurched people I know, let alone the church people, that these big, gaudy wonder stories claimed for Jesus are factual historical events, or that they are important parts of the Christian spiritual practice, because they're not. So when the Transfigure story visits the lectionary readings, which it does every year and repeatedly, I want to kind of duck and hide. Now, I apologize for this failing on my part, but not really. And yet, even though I feel this way about the Transfiguration story, I get hopping mad about its tragic association with the suffering inflicted upon Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, and, of course, the history of the world since. We can argue history and whether or not Truman's choice was the right one. His war cabinet was divided about it, so we can be too. But surely we aren't divided in rendering it a deep human flaw and tragedy that we are hell-bent on inventing such weapons and other sciences too that become the source of our suffering and endangerment. We just can't seem to help ourselves. But now, let us back up from this sorrow that we've been talking about and recall what else we know. We know that there are transfigurations and transformations all over the place. You and I, every one of us, has witnessed more than one in our lifetimes. I'm thinking about people I have known who never thought that they would love or be loved again after terrible things happened. But then, very late in life, fresh new romance and love was discovered, and it changed the trajectory of their lives. I'm thinking about people I have known who were told that they had stage 4 cancer and not long to live, only to live and live and live with a gratitude and a joy that transformed how they remembered their lives in the past as well as how they lived them into the future. I'm thinking of people I have known who were locked into binary ways of thinking about the world. You know, those either or ways of seeing and believing that frame how we perceive things. People who were stuck, hemmed in, often angry, often bitter, who were changed by something small or unexpected. Just happened, and then they were different. I'm thinking about that wonderful poem by the Rochester native Marie Howe, an Episcopalian even, at least she once was, how she describes seeing, quote, something rise from the dust in the yard like the soul of the dust, or from the field, the soul body of the field rise and hover like a veil in the sun, billowing as if she could see the wind itself. And how there are moments all of us have had when we see something or imagine we see something that makes no sense. And yet, if we allow ourselves permission, we may just see it. They are wisps of hope and the knowledge against evidence and the truths that may not be facts and the clouds of unknowing seen through the thin veil held always between God and ourselves. They are those things we can't hardly believe we saw or heard or understood even 5 minutes after they pass, and yet we do. These are the things that change us, sometimes even transfigure us, sometimes make us different enough that tragedies and heartaches are averted and history changed for the better. I know you know what I'm talking about, and that you've had one or more of such moments. There can be other ones too, if we stay open, if we keep our hearts and our minds pried open against the winds of resistance blowing so hard against us these days. I believe in you. I do. I believe that we will have more such moments. And that is what I have to leave you with for the next several weeks as I go on an August break. Thank you so much for being present, being part of this. There will be sermons, archived sermons posted over the next 4 weeks, but I wish you a very splendid end of summer, and peace be with you. That was beautiful, Lisa.